Good evening. My name is Wendy Book. I'm going to share a little bit today about working on parenteral nutrition. I will be sharing my personal story and discuss some strategies that have worked for me for career management. We'll go over workplace adaptations, communicating with employers and colleagues, your legal rights, workplace accommodations, FMLA, managing energy levels, appointments, and work-related travel, and mental health and resilience strategies. In the interest of full disclosure, I am not a lawyer. I will talk about some legal topics, but I am not a lawyer, so you should do your own research, of course. And I will be sharing my personal experience. We all have different underlying diseases that have led to needing parenteral nutrition that affect our ability to work. And we all come from different backgrounds and have different opportunities. So I will share my particular story, and I'm interested in hearing other people's stories as well. My story starts actually when my son was born. He was sick as an infant, had chronic illness requiring a feeding tube throughout his childhood. As a result of that experience, I was very familiar with advocating for his rights, advocating for accommodations in the school system, and advocating for him in the doctor's offices. I became sick later in life. I have been on parenteral nutrition since 2017 for dysmotility, and that's on the background of a complicated medical history. Um, I probably struggled for several years to accept that I needed parenteral nutrition and was trying to get by with IV hydration for several years before finally moving to parenteral nutrition. My job is a cardiologist. I work at an academic medical center. I originally worked in uh, congenital heart disease, which I still do, but also in the heart failure and transplantation program. It was a very busy job. I was on my feet for long hours, and overnight call and coming in overnight for all sorts of emergencies. And there really was not an opportunity to rest or focus on my health in that particular job situation. I discovered I feel better running my parenteral nutrition during the day. So there were also logistical challenges to work out. I ended up using a fanny pack to carry it around with me during the day so my hands could be free. And for a while, I was still working in the cath lab doing procedures with my TPN tucked under my lead apron, as you can see here. Uh, as I said, this was probably not the best decision for my health to continue on that path, and I pivoted to primarily research. I was able to do this because I already worked part-time in research going into the illness, and I was able to successfully compete for grant funding and shift most of my time over to the research arena. And that gives me much more flexibility than I had in clinical work. Why did I try so hard to make work work? Well, mostly for the health insurance. My family, my chronically ill son, my chronically ill husband, they both depend on me for the family's health insurance. And it's been very important to me to try to keep that up. I also love my job. It gives me a great sense of meaning and purpose. And I was very reluctant to walk away completely from my work. And I also wanted to provide an example to my son of how to manage chronic illness and a career. But illness did significantly impact my career. As I said, my job was a lot and did not leave time for self-care. Continuing to work was a struggle. So I did pivot to a job that is primarily research. I'm still in the office 2 days a month. Um, and I would love to hear what other people are doing and how they've managed to make it work. I'm going to go over a few resources that can be helpful in adapting your work environment to your chronic illness, accommodations under the Americans with Disability Act, Family Medical Leave Act for either intermittent or continuous leave, residual disability. I won't get into that much, but if you are already in a workplace and have a private policy, look at the language in that policy. It may be possible to cut back hours and use that policy to make up some of the financial gap. And always look out for those people who are going to support you and lift you up, whether that be family, friends, or coworkers. Under the Americans with Disability Act, workplace accommodations must be provided for individuals with disabilities. And the gist of the ADA is the employer is required to provide reasonable accommodations unless those accommodations would cause undue hardship to the employer. Undue hardship could be interpreted differently by a small family business than a large corporation, for instance. So that is something that you have to sort out with your employer. The other key point of the ADA is that you have to be able to perform the essential functions of your job with the accommodations. So if you're a truck driver and you unfortunately experience blindness, you no longer can perform those essential functions of the job, even with accommodations. Some examples of reasonable accommodations are modifying your workspace, accessibility and assistive technologies, which are fairly readily available in the computer. Today, the computer software contains a lot of those accessibility technologies. I personally, I have a background of neuromuscular issues that are the cause of the dysmotility. I needed some adaptive equipment to function in the office, so I asked for an adaptive mouse and keyboard tray and a chair, and I stay in one room instead of hopping room to room like my colleagues do when I'm in the office. So that's an example of an accommodation you can ask for. Other examples are adjusting work schedule to deal with your chronic illness. If, for instance, getting out the door in the morning is very challenging for you and you need to start later, you could ask to shift your work schedule to a later start and a later end. In terms of disclosing your illness, for the purposes of accommodations, it's really a need to know. And one of the things you need to know is who handles those accommodations at your workplace. We have an accessibility and disabilities office at my workplace, and maybe in a smaller workplace, a manager or a supervisor who handles this. I would suggest disclosing only what's necessary. So, for instance, because of my disability, I am unable to use a traditional mouse, and I would like an adaptive mouse in my workspace so that I can perform my job. That would be an example. They don't need to know all the details of your illness. They need to know only what's relevant and what accommodation you need to perform the essential functions of your job. I think it helps to be flexible in the accommodations. Is your first choice may not work for the employer, so it's always good to have backup plan. As another example of an accommodation I had asked for while I was still working in the cath lab and my office were in the same building, and then they moved the cath lab to another building that was across the street, involved some hills to get there. And for me, going back and forth was more than I could do. So I asked for a small space in the other building where I could keep medical supplies and have a refrigerator and have a chair and table. And they were able to provide that for me in the other building so that when I was working over there, I didn't have to walk back to my office. Family and Medical Leave Act. This is for times when you cannot perform the essential functions of your job due to serious illness. Um, I think everybody listening today has serious illness. Uh, this gives you up to 12 weeks of unpaid job protective leave. So when you get back from your leave, your job is still there for you and it's unpaid. You may be able to use sick time, vacation time, etc., but the gist of it is it's unpaid leave. To be eligible, you have to have worked a certain number of hours for 12 months prior to requesting leave. There are some requirements for the employer to be of a certain size, 50 or more employees within 75 miles as an example. And FMLA can be taken as continuous leave. So for instance, when you have a surgery, you need to be out for a couple of months, that's continuous FMLA. I also use what's called intermittent FMLA. So each year I ask for uh, 1 to 2 days off per month to handle the myriad medical appointments. I'm sure many of you can relate. I have more than a dozen doctors and they order all sorts of tests every year. So I need those couple of days a month to handle doctor's appointments. You will be required for FMLA to fill out a form explaining exactly what you're asking for, and it's important to make sure your doctor fills out the form in the same way, so you're asking for the same thing. I have found this whole journey to be very challenging. Um, Leaving a job I truly loved and pivoting to a job I also love was difficult. You grieve that loss of identity and meaning and purpose that you have from your work when you have to step away from work you've done for a long time. For me, there was a tremendous amount of guilt. I was director of my program, and I took good care of my people, and I prided myself on doing so. So stepping away from that involved a lot of guilt as well. And then there's the physical challenges. For me, being in the office is incredibly tiring and fatiguing. I typically take 3 to 4 days to recover. And from a support perspective, finding those people who lift you up is helpful. My husband has been absolutely wonderful throughout my illness, as has my entire family and my friends. And I have been very, very lucky to have good support in the workplace. They have approached my illness with tell us what you need and we will try to make it work. And that has been really key to continuing to be able to work in some capacity. Um, from mental health and resilience perspective, I mean, this is hard. Let's face it, this is really hard. Sometimes you're going to have a bad day and not going to be coping as well, and just have to give yourself a little grace and accept that this is difficult. It takes time to adapt to a new reality. It takes patience. It took me a good bit of time to adapt. Making time for your health is really, really important, and that took me a while to learn, but it's very important to make time for your health. Exercise, also very important for mental health. I make sure I get out and walk every day, enjoy the birds, the trees, the flowers. Uh, every day without fail, I get outside to walk, and I also do Pilates once a week, which I also find very relaxing. From the years taking care of a chronically ill child, we had focused a lot on the can do, and I think that translates well to adults as well. Kind of focus on what you are able to do, not on what you're not able to do. And probably the most important thing for me was learning how to say no. Um, So managing energy appointments, I explained a little bit about how I use FMLA for appointments, and I try to schedule those appointments at a time that does not interfere with key activities at work. I, as best I can, try not to disrupt the work schedule. In terms of managing energy, if there are job duties that exhaust you and you need to consider shifting job duties, that's something to look at if it's feasible. It's not always feasible for everybody. I personally feel better in the morning. I schedule more critical work and meetings in the morning and save the afternoon when I'm exhausted for more mundane tasks that don't require as much attention. I've learned to accept the need to rest, and I have cut back my hours quite a bit, which has helped. I work from home most of the time. My research, most of it can be done from home. And in terms of work-related travel, I personally don't have a lot of work-related travel. I have maybe a couple of trips a year, and I understand what's necessary for me to do, and I do only what is necessary for me to do. So if I have a 3-day meeting I have to attend, but I'm only needed for a day and a half, I'm only going for a day and a half. For me, traveling is by myself is difficult. And again, learning to say no to extra tasks. I was a big yes person, and transitioning to saying, no, I'm sorry, I can't take on that additional task at this time was really important to managing my energy levels. Here's some resources for you. The ADA.gov site has information on Americans with Disability Act. The EOEC Commission has information on FMLA as well as ADA accommodations, and there are numerous resources out there if you require Social Security disability, which will not talk about today. And I will end there, and I believe we're going to have a little time for questions. Thank you.